Spyderco's latest sprint run is the Manix 2 lightweight in Rex 45 steel. What is a sprint run? What makes it lightweight? What is Rex 45 steel? We're going to answer those questions and review the Manix 2 knife. And spoiler alert, there are some things I really like about this knife, some things I don't. So let's go inside and figure out if there's anything special about Rex 45 steel. Welcome back to Blade Insider, where we talk all things knives. Today we're focused on the Spyderco Manix 2 in Rex 45 steel. First, let's talk about the Manix knife. This is an Eric Glesser design knife. The original Manix was released in 2005 and had a back lock along its mid-spine. It's characterized by a large leaf blade and ergonomic handle. The Manix 2 followed up in 2010 with the addition of a ball bearing lock. This is a hardened, free-floating ball bearing contained in a custom, high-tech polymer cage. The Manix 2 has been produced in a number of different sprint runs, including this version, the Rex 45. Now, what is a sprint run? Spyderco is notorious for its sprint runs. These are limited editions of a product in a different configuration than what it was previously produced. Think of new blade steels or scale colors. Really, it's a way for manufacturers to put out new products without having to design and market a new knife. But it's also a way for collectors to get their hands on different and semi-rare knives for their collection. Some people hate them. I like them. Before we get into the weeds on this knife, consider subscribing to this channel. We publish new content each week, and we would love to have you back. You can ring the bell to be notified of new content, and if you like the video, please hit that like button. The Manix 2 is a sprint run from Spyderco. It's been very difficult to find because it has been spread out among various vendors in limited quantities. Every time a vendor announces that he has stock, it sells out within hours. So what makes this knife so special? Normally, Manix 2s are made with S30V steel, but they do come in a variety of different steels, including S110V, S90V, and Maximum. In this sprint run, Spyderco is making the knife with Rex 45 tool steel. It's a pretty rare steel used on knife blades. CPM Rex 45 is a super high-speed particle metallurgy tool steel enriched with large volumes of cobalt, tungsten, and vanadium. Its high cobalt content increases the steel's attainable hardness and enhances the positive properties of the steel's other alloys. The addition of vanadium promotes the formation of vanadium carbides, which provide high wear resistance, fine grain size, and increased toughness. Let's go to the bench and take a closer look at this knife. I review my knives looking at 5 different factors. The first factor is design and aesthetics. Spyderco is making all of the Rex 45 knives in this burnt orange color. Burnt orange is not my favorite color, but this is a part of a sprint run, so I'm really not bothered by it. The Manix is made out of their FRN synthetic material. This makes for a very lightweight knife. Normally, I don't mind the FRN and have it on my Para 3 and some other Seki City knives. But on this knife, it feels just plasticky. I don't know if plasticky is a word or not, but it feels somewhat cheap. Also, this may be a little nitpicky, but if you look on the back where the scales meet the back spacer, you see that they're not flush with each other, that there's a definite gap here between the scales and the back spacer. For a over $100 knife, I would expect more. And this is made in Golden, Colorado. So again, I would expect the workmanship and the engineering on this knife to be just a little better. We've got Spyderco's famous wire clip on this. They put this wire clip on most of their lightweight knives, and I just love this clip. I love it for the simplicity of it. It's very lightweight. It goes into and out of the pocket very easily, and it's just simplistically designed. You know, some of the designs, best designs, are the ones that are the most simple. If we look at the knife here, we can see that there's a torque screw for the pivot on each side, and also another one for the clip. Now the clip can be moved for right and left hand tip up, and the pivot can be adjusted, but there are no torque bits for these screws on the scales, meaning I don't believe you can disassemble this knife. Spyderco uses their ball bearing lock on this knife. At first glance, it looks like Benchmade's Access lock. Looking at this lock system with clear scales, we see that it wedges a ball bearing between a fixed anvil and blade tang. This mechanism also serves as a detent to hold the blade in a closed position. The problem is with the spring mechanism. With an access lock, the resistance is from the omega spring. The spring has just the right amount of tension to easily operate the knife. With this ball bearing lock, it has too much resistance and doesn't easily open the lock. Good knives just work. You shouldn't have to strain to get your knife opened and closed. Looking at the blade, we see that it's a full flat grind leaf-shaped blade with a satin finish. The blade is very thin and very slicey. The round hole is 14 millimeters and seems larger than other Spydercos I own. For design and aesthetics, I'm going to give this knife a 3 out of 5. I'm not a fan of the ball bearing lock, and the scales and back spacer should be flush with each other. The next factor is carryability. But before we get into that, let's run the tail of the tape on this knife. The blade length is 3.37 inches. Closed length is 4.66 inches, and the overall length is 8.03 inches. Blade thickness is 0.125 inches, and we have a leaf-shaped full flat satin blade. The handle material is FRN, and it has a ball bearing lock system. The knife weighs 3 ounces. This is a big knife, so let's compare it with some other knives to get a feel for its size. First, let's compare it with some Spydercos. Here is the Delica and the Paramilitary number 2. As you can see, the Delica is quite a bit smaller, and the Paramilitary 2 is about the same size, although the Manix is wider both in the blade shape and the handle. Next, let's compare it to the ZT-0562. It's a very comparable knife to the Manix 2, although the ZT is a much more heavy-duty and more substantial knife than the Manix 2. Next, compare it to one of my favorites, the Osborne 9400. It's a little bigger than the Osborne, both in the length and the width. They have nearly the same length in the blade, although the Manix 2 is much, much wider. Finally, I want to compare it to the Super Freak by Benchmade. When I held the Manix 2, it felt most like the Super Freak. You can see they're about the same length. Super Freak is just a little longer. They have nearly the same width in the blade, but this is more of a leaf shape, whereas it's a drop point on the Benchmade. The handle size are nearly the same. The Benchmade Super Freak has thicker handles with that G10 than the lightweight Manix 2. Now let's talk ergonomics. I really believe that Spyderco, more than anyone else, is the best at designing ergonomic knives, and the Manix 2 is no exception. Let's start with the handle. It really fits well in my large hands. It has perfect placement for my fingers, and the clip molds to the palm of my hand. You can also choke up on this knife with the finger choil. There are no pinch points when bearing down on this knife. And attention to detail is what sets Spyderco apart from other brands. Look at the spine of this knife. You can see this simple jimping along the back near where the scales meet the blade. And then again, not aggressive, but simple jimping on the spine of the knife blade. We also have that jimping here along the belly of the knife. That gives you a firm grip on the knife, and it's not going to slip out of your hands. I want to quickly show how this knife fits in a pair of jeans. It's too large to fit in the watch pocket, but it fits very well in the regular pocket of your jeans. That clip allows it to go in and out quite easily. You just have a little part sticking out, and the blade, while it's a wide knife, that blade will fit in the fold of that pocket, allowing you a lot of room to put your gear in, including your wallet or your keys or your phone. For carryability, this knife gets a 4.5 out of 5. Ergonomics are top notch on this knife, and for a bigger blade, it fits well in the pocket. The next factor is materials. This is a difficult category to rate on this knife. The scales are FRN and they feel plasticky. You know, if you bear down on these, there is flex to those scales. I don't know why, because other FRN knives from Spyderco never leave me with that impression. Now, knife steel is pretty spectacular on this knife. It has the Rex 45 super high-speed particle metallurgy tool steel, but it's not stainless, so you'll need to care for the metal and wipe it off when cutting into fruit. The metal is special on this knife, but the scales are not. For materials, this knife gets a 3.5 out of 5. Let's talk about utility. Does the knife do what it was designed to do? The Manix 2 is a big knife with a big blade. The blade length is over 3.4 inches and the overall length is over 8 inches. Rex 45 blade steel is tough and durable. The edge on this should last you through some heavy work. I don't like the locking mechanism, but that doesn't affect the usability of this knife. Now, the knife came sharp from Spyderco. It cuts through paper like butter. Take a look. That knife is sharp. For usability, I'm going to give this knife a 4.5 out of 5. The last factor is value. What kind of value do you get for this knife? The knife retails for about $120 if you can get your hands on it. For that price, you're getting a big knife with blade steel that is very rare and tough to find. I think it's a great value. So this knife gets a 4.5 out of 5. I give it a 5 out of 5 if Spyderco put it in a better box. Once you add up all the individual scores, the overall score of this knife is 4.0 out of 5. Not a bad knife, but not my favorite Spyderco. Spyderco as a brand is fantastic, and they do build some of my favorite knives. And they're a great company when it comes to sprint runs and putting different steels into our collection. Personally, I'm not a fan of the ball bearing lock and the FRN scales on this particular knife. But those scales do make an 8-inch knife come in at 3 ounces. And I think that was their goal all along. What do you think about the Manix 2? Am I alone in my opinion about this knife? Do you like these sprint runs? And what do you think about the Rex 45 steel? Leave those comments down below. And while you're down there, please consider subscribing to this channel for more great weekly content. And if you got anything out of this video, please hit that like button. We'll see you next week.